He's here. Jenna nearly dropped her glass when she heard herself whisper those words. Her eyes locked on the familiar silhouette in the corner of the room. There was no mistaking it. Even after nearly 3 years, she still recognized the way he leaned when he laughed, the subtle lift of his hand as if he were starring in some whiskey commercial. Lucas Bennett, the man she once loved so deeply she lost herself, and the one who pushed her into the depths of doubt and self-destruction. Soft music played. Golden light shimmered against the rippling surface of her cocktail. No one in that vast room noticed that Jenna Caldwell had just been pulled back into a time she swore she'd buried. Her fingers tightened around the gin and tonic, the only thing helping her maintain a calm facade. The midnight blue gown hugged her figure. Her hair fell in loose waves, and she looked every bit like an upgraded version of the woman who once fell apart. But Jenna knew too well. One look from him, and all that confidence could crumble like a house without a foundation. 3 years. It took her nearly 3 years to escape the sweet, poisonous kind of love Lucas offered. The way he always made her feel like she needed to try harder, look better, speak less, be more successful, smile less, tone down her emotions. And when she'd finally shrunk herself so small she barely recognized who she was, he ended things with a cold text message at 1 a.m. Jenna drew in a deep breath. Not tonight. Not after everything she'd rebuilt. Across the room, Lucas was still smiling, and worse. He was talking to Avery Shaw, the senior vice president at Jenna's company. One of the people holding full control over the budget for the PR campaign Jenna had just been assigned to lead. Her first official project, after 5 relentless years of climbing every rung in the corporate ladder. She glanced around. No one seemed to notice the storm rising inside her. Everyone was too busy networking, posing for photos, nibbling canapés, swapping business cards, pretending to care. A typical fundraising gala, polished, glittering, and full of smiles that lasted 1 second too long. She took a small step back, leaning against the column near the bar. She needed space, needed to think, needed to figure out how to face this without falling apart. "You okay?" A woman's voice came from beside her. It was Elise Tran, the only colleague Jenna actually trusted at the office. Elise handed her a glass of water, her gaze tilting subtly toward Lucas. "I'm guessing that's him." Jenna nodded, her throat dry. "Yeah, and now he's pouring drinks for our boss. Fantastic." "You're not his ex anymore, Jen. You're Jenna Caldwell, the woman behind a 6-figure campaign, the woman in that dress that makes people turn their heads." Jenna let out a faint laugh, knowing Elise was trying to cheer her up, but inside all she felt was a long, quiet sigh, like an old wound that still stung. Across the room, Lucas clinked glasses with Avery. Then he turned, and their eyes met. For exactly 1 second. Just one. But it was enough for Jenna to feel every layer of armor she'd built start to peel away. She took a sip, swallowing the sharp burn that had become second nature over the past 3 years, whenever her mind began to spiral. Not tonight. Not for someone like him. Jenna straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and fixed her eyes on the stage where the silent auction was about to begin. She wasn't here to let the past drag her back into the mud. She was here to represent her team, to prove that the board's decision to promote her had been the right one. To stand on equal ground with the people who once made her feel small. But a small part of her still trembled. Because one quiet question floated through her mind. Did he come here because of me? She hated that she still cared. Her gin glass was empty. She turned toward the bartender to order another, when a stranger appeared beside her, holding out a glass of water before she could even speak. "You look like someone who could use something non-alcoholic." Jenna turned to him. And for the first time that evening, she wasn't thinking about Lucas, a stranger. Steady eyes, a calm presence, and somehow, that calmness made her heartbeat change direction. The stranger was still standing there, glass in hand, the chandelier's light catching his eyes. A strange, pale gray, like they held an entire sky of calm inside this noisy room. Jenna hadn't even managed to thank him when Elise's look made her freeze. "Jen, he's coming." "Lucas?" She didn't need to turn around to know he was walking toward her. That feeling was still there, the chill running down her spine, the heartbeat skipping out of rhythm, and the quiet voice in her head trying to steady her. "Stay calm. He's just someone you used to know." But no. The look on his face, that smug smile, that slow, deliberate walk, as if the world revolved around him, told her everything. Lucas wasn't coming over to say hello. He was coming to remind her she'd never really escaped his orbit. In that split second, Jenna's eyes darted around for an exit. Elise had drifted away to greet someone. She was alone, and the stranger, he was still beside her, silent, as if he'd appeared at precisely the right moment by accident. Jenna's heart pounded. A reckless thought flashed through her mind, absurd, impulsive, but the only thing that might help her keep a shred of pride. She leaned in toward him, her voice low and trembling. "Can you kiss me? My ex is watching." The man turned to her, clearly surprised. A second later, the corner of his mouth lifted, not in mockery, but in a kind of warm, almost conspiratorial smile. "You sure?" Jenna swallowed hard. "Sure." He set his glass down. Without a word, his hand brushed her cheek, not hurried, not claiming, but as if he were asking permission. Jenna didn't pull away. For a moment, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. He leaned in, his breath carrying a trace of mint, and the kiss, brief, only a few seconds, was enough to make her heart pound so fast it hurt. It wasn't like any kiss she'd ever known, not possessive, not performative. It was real and gentle in a way that made her almost forget she was pretending. When he pulled back, their eyes met in a strange, suspended silence. Jenna couldn't breathe. Then she heard footsteps. Lucas. He stopped in the middle of the crowd, his eyes darkening, his jaw tightening. He didn't say a word, just raised his glass, gave a faint, bitter smile, and turned away. Jenna exhaled, caught somewhere between relief and confusion. She had just kissed a stranger. At a company gala, in front of her boss, in front of her ex. And worst of all, she didn't regret it. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice so soft it was almost only for herself. The man lifted his glass of water and handed it to her. "You're welcome, but I've got to say, that's the boldest request I've ever gotten at a gala." Jenna flushed. "I don't know why I—" He smiled, light as air. "It's okay. Sometimes people just need an excuse to move past something." The words made Jenna pause. There was something in his tone, like he knew exactly what it felt like to be running from a memory. She gave a small, awkward laugh. "I guess I owe you an apology, and maybe a drink." "No need. I don't drink." He twirled the glass in his hand. "I'm Theo." "Jenna?" "Jenna," he repeated slowly as if committing it to memory. "That's a beautiful name." She looked at him more closely. No wedding ring, no flashiness, just a well-fitted suit, shirt sleeves rolled slightly to reveal a simple black watch. There was something about him that drew curiosity, yet also made her afraid to wake a sadness quietly resting beneath the surface. A waiter passed by, offering more drinks. Jenna shook her head. When she turned back, she saw Theo glancing toward the doorway, where Lucas had just left. "Your ex didn't look too happy." Jenna let out a soft laugh, though her chest still felt unsteady. "I'm guessing he doesn't like losing." Theo gave a small shrug. "No one does, but it looks like he just did." His words made Jenna turn away to hide her smile. Not the bright kind, but the kind that feels like release. The kind she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt. A moment later, Elise reappeared, eyes wide as she took in the scene. "What on earth just happened here?" "Nothing," Jenna said, her voice still a little shaky. "Just self-defense." With a kiss. Elise looked at her, then at Theo, and sighed. "If that's your idea of self-defense, I'd say it's a pretty dangerous one." She walked off, leaving Jenna and Theo in a brief, quiet pocket of time. Neither of them spoke, only the soft jazz drifting through the air, and something unnamed beginning to take shape in the silence between them. "What the hell did you just do?" Elise asked later, her voice low as the two of them leaned against the railing out in the hallway, the one leading to the smoking area where no one actually smoked. Jenna exhaled, the glass still cold in her hand. "I just kissed a man I don't know, in front of my ex, at a company gala." "Sounds like the synopsis of a Netflix movie," Elise smirked. "But hey, you okay?" Jenna nodded, though she wasn't sure what exactly was stirring inside her. She glanced back toward the ballroom, where Theo stood alone, leaning casually against the bar. His posture calm, unaffected, as if what had just happened was nothing unusual at all. "Are you gonna talk to him?" Elise asked. "Sorry," Jenna said, then left the hallway, stepping back into the soft golden light of the ballroom. Theo turned as she approached, as if he'd already known she would come back. "Did you come back because you missed the kiss?" he asked, his voice low, touched with a hint of teasing warmth. Jenna laughed. "I came back to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dragged you into that impulsive mess." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Nothing to apologize for. I didn't mind. Still, it's a little weird." "Only if we make it that way," he said simply. She didn't answer. There was something about this man that made her feel unexpectedly at ease. It wasn't his looks or his words. It was the feeling of being allowed to just be. No pretending. No trying to guess what someone wanted from her. "Were you here as a guest tonight?" Jenna asked, more to keep the conversation going than anything. "Yeah, a friend of mine's on the fundraising board." He shrugged lightly. "I actually just moved back to the area a few months ago. Trying to find my rhythm again." "Where did you move from?" "The West Coast." He didn't specify. "What made you leave?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes following the swirl of water in his glass. It was just time to go. The answer didn't say much, but it didn't sound evasive either. It was simply the response of someone who didn't want to dig deeper, and somehow Jenna respected that. She nodded slightly. "I've had to leave a few things behind myself." He looked at her again. "I'm guessing him?" Jenna smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying. "Ever looked at someone like they were your whole world?" she said evenly, "only to realize you're standing in a dark room with no windows." Theo froze, just for a heartbeat, but she noticed. "Yeah," he said softly, "just one word. And what did you do to get out?" This time, he met her gaze. "I didn't. I lost that person." The words hit like a quiet wave breaking against the shore. Jenna didn't ask anything else. What she saw in his eyes wasn't anger or even sadness, just a quiet kind of emptiness, the kind only people who've truly lost something can carry for that long. She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "No need. It's part of me now." Neither of them spoke after that. A waiter passed by with a tray of small desserts. Jenna took one, just to have something to hold. "For the record, I don't usually do impulsive things like that," she said, trying to lighten the air. "So I'm special then?" She laughed. "No, Lucas just brings out the worst in my sanity." Theo tilted his head. "He seems like the type who makes people believe they're never enough." Jenna froze for a beat. "How'd you know?" "Because I've been where you are. Not in love, exactly. But someone once made me doubt myself for a long time after they left." His words weren't meant to comfort. They were more like a small mirror, and in it, Jenna saw herself. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not treating me like a joke tonight." "You're not a joke," he replied. "You're just someone trying to take back control, and honestly, doing a pretty good job of it." They both laughed. Soft, knowing laughter. The kind that belongs to two people who, for a brief moment, have crossed the invisible line between strangers. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Elise. "Boss is asking where you are. Speech is coming up soon." "I should probably get back to my actual role now," Jenna said, glancing at Theo. "It was really nice meeting you, even if the start was a little unconventional." "Jenna?" He said her name just as she turned to leave. She paused, looking back. "Let's hope that wasn't the last time." She didn't answer, just smiled. But as she walked away, her heart quietly admitted something it hadn't felt in a long time. She wanted to see someone again. The day after the gala, Jenna was about to send out the draft proposal for the new campaign when a new email notification popped up on her screen. One that made her pause. From Theo Whitman. Subject: lunch? That was it. Simple. No fluff. No overthinking. Beneath it, a single line read, "I know a quiet place. Not too many ties around. If you need to unplug from the world for a bit, I've got a table at 12:30. Below was the address of a small restaurant in an old converted warehouse, a creative space she'd heard of but never visited. And at the very bottom, "P.S. I asked Elise. She said I should email instead of text." I followed instructions. Jenna couldn't help but smile. The place Theo had chosen sat tucked inside a brick corner, with long wooden tables and black painted metal chairs. Sunlight poured through the big window panes, not fancy, but alive with a kind of quiet energy. When Jenna arrived, he was already there at a table by the window, holding a worn cloth-bound book. No phone, no laptop, just a glass of iced tea and the kind of patience that doesn't need to rush. "You actually came," he said with a small smile when he saw her. "Only because you promised minimal Thai presents," Jenna replied, taking a seat. "And the food's not bad either," he said, handing her a menu. "They make a mean pastrami sandwich, and their apple tart has been known to make people forget their deadlines." Jenna laughed. "You've sold me," they ordered. And then, without any effort at all, their conversation began to flow. Easy, natural, unforced, with no one trying to prove anything. Jenna told him about the campaign she was leading. The pressure of working with an executive board made up mostly of older men who demanded precision, but flinched at the word change. Theo listened without interrupting, only occasionally asking a question that made her pause and really think before answering. Not the kind of question people ask to keep a conversation going, but the kind they ask when they actually care. "So what line of work are you in?" Jenna asked after finishing her story about last week's legal department meltdown. "Still around healthcare," he said. "A clinical diagnostics tech project. I used to work in medical data, but I've shifted focus a bit." "Sounds important." "Mostly it's just trying not to make an already messy system messier." Jenna laughed. "That's the perfect description of my industry too." "And," Theo said, still looking out the window, "it probably applies to human emotions as well." Jenna hesitated. His words had brushed against something she'd spent a long time trying not to touch. "Why do you think people keep holding on to things that hurt them?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Because sometimes," he said, "familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar emptiness." Jenna stayed quiet. She didn't agree or disagree, but something inside her shifted, just slightly, like a door creaking open. "After the breakup, I couldn't sleep for almost a year," she said after a pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I still loved him, but because I didn't know who I was anymore." Theo set his glass down, listening. Not interrupting, not fixing, just there. "I used to think being strong was all it took to move on," she went on. "But the truth is, strength has limits." "It does," he said simply. A gentle silence followed, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then Jenna looked at him. "I know I probably shouldn't ask, but that person you mentioned before, the one you lost, who was she?" Theo didn't look away. He didn't hesitate. "She was my fiancée," he said slowly. "We got engaged in August. In November, she was in a car accident, an intersection not far from home. I was in a meeting when the hospital called." Jenna didn't interrupt. She just watched him. "She was gone before I got there," he continued, his voice calm in a way that hurt even more. "Since then, I haven't really known whether I'm living or just breathing every day." The words, stripped of any dramatics, sank into Jenna's mind like an arrow that didn't rush to pierce, only pressed in, steady and deep. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, and meant it. He shook his head. "I'm not telling you for sympathy. It's just, sometimes people need to name their wounds so they'll stop being ruled by them." "Have you managed to do that?" Jenna asked. He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the exhaustion there, honest and unhidden. "Not yet," he said softly, "but I'm trying." The meal ended in silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like understanding. When they stood up, Jenna had the strange sense that they'd both stepped across an invisible threshold, not into romance, but into honesty. On the drive back to the office, she didn't put on music like she usually did. She just sat quietly watching the city slide past her window. She couldn't name the feeling. But something inside her had stirred, a part long forgotten. The simple, unguarded desire to understand someone, without needing anything in return. 3 days after that lunch, Jenna was waiting for her coffee in the lobby cafe when her gaze drifted to the magazine rack inside the convenience store next door. A copy of Business Insight sat on the top shelf, the headline bold and glossy, "The mysterious mind behind a $280 million medical AI company. Who is Theo Whitman?" She froze. That name. Then she saw the black and white photo, not a close-up, but close enough for her to recognize those eyes. The same eyes that had met hers, steady, unflinching, needing no excuses. It was him. She yanked the magazine off the rack and flipped it open to the middle pages. The articles stretched nearly 4 full spreads, detailing the story of a software engineer who once worked at Stanford Medical, then walked away from big corporations to found an AI platform designed to help doctors make clinical decisions. No social media, no press statements, almost no public photos, except for a few taken at medical conferences 2 years ago. But Jenna didn't need any more proof. She knew. The man who had quietly walked into that gala night, who had kissed her as if they'd once belonged to each other in another lifetime, was the very same man now staring back from the cover, beneath the headline, "The Hidden Genius." Jenna walked straight to her car, the magazine still in her hand. She needed air. She needed to make sense of this. She wasn't angry. She didn't feel betrayed. But inside her was a restless hum, like a door had suddenly opened behind her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to step through. That afternoon, Jenna typed out a short message. No preamble, no small talk. "Are you free tonight?" A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. His reply was immediate. "I am, but I'm guessing tonight I won't be the one asking the questions." They met at the same cafe, same table, the same window spilling with late afternoon light, though this time it felt less warm. Jenna didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're Theo Whitman, founder of Synapse AI." He gave a small nod, eyes steady. "I am? And you knew I had no idea who you were." "I did." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Theo exhaled, resting his hand on the glass of water. "Because I didn't think it was necessary." "Not necessary?" Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Not in a dismissive way," he said quickly. "It's just, I don't walk around carrying a business card with my net worth printed on it. My life already has enough people who only see me through growth metrics and funding rounds." Jenna said nothing. She understood, but understanding didn't erase the feeling that something important had been withheld. "Did it ever occur to you," she asked quietly, "that who you are might change the way I see everything that's happened between us?" "Yes, and that's exactly why I didn't tell you," he said, his voice steady. "I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't see the need to display it. Fame, it's a mask. The longer you wear it, the harder it gets to breathe." A soft breeze drifted past the window. Jenna looked at him, more closely than before. He was still Theo, the man who had cupped her cheek on that chaotic night. But now she also saw the man who belonged to a world she'd never stepped into, a world that made her both admire him and feel slightly unmoored. "So why did you approach me?" she asked, her voice low. This time he didn't answer right away. A few seconds passed before he spoke, barely above a whisper. "Because you were the first person who looked at me and didn't see the mask of success." Jenna froze. The words weren't dressed up, not poetic, just disarmingly honest. "You know what's strange?" she said after a pause. "I'm not even angry." Theo looked at her, waiting. "But I don't feel relieved either," she continued. "I'm trying to figure out whether we're talking because there's a real connection or because one of us is surprised and the other is just dealing with the fallout of a hidden truth." "Maybe it's both," he said honestly. She nodded. "I don't like perfect answers, but I do like the truth." He smiled, for the first time that evening. "Then I guess I still have a chance." "You do," Jenna said, "but the door's only open. No one's walked through yet." They both laughed, soft, thin laughter, the kind that doesn't need to fill the silence. Outside the window, the late sunlight brushed the edge of the rooftops across the street. And even though 1,000 questions still lived quietly inside her, Jenna knew one thing for certain. Not everyone is brave enough to open a door. But once it's open, what waits beyond it is no longer the dark. Since meeting Theo again, and learning who he really was, Jenna hadn't spoken a word about it to anyone at work. She went back to her routine, even sharper, more focused than before, as if determined to prove that everything she achieved came from her own ability, not from any connection outside the office. And it showed. Within 2 weeks, the media campaign she proposed was selected for presentation to the investment board. Her name started surfacing in more senior meetings. The department once labeled as support was suddenly being called the company's new strategic core. Everything was moving in the right direction. Until the name Lucas Bennett appeared in an internal email. Jenna read the message 3 times, her eyes fixed on the short announcement. Candidate Lucas Bennett will be interviewing for the position of Director of Public Relations next week. She sat frozen in front of the screen. Director of PR, a role equal to hers, one that would have him co-leading upcoming campaigns. And Lucas, the same man who'd once made her cry in the bathroom of her old firm with words sharp enough to cut through pride, was about to sit across from her in the conference room? That couldn't be a coincidence. Jenna wasn't paranoid. But her instincts, the same instincts that had saved her from more than one career disaster, were ringing loud this time, and she knew better than to ignore them. She started digging. Quietly, carefully. A few polite messages to HR, some casual questions to the comms department, a closer look at the candidate file attached to the email. Everything looked too clean. Nothing shady, but nothing real either. The kind of profile polished to perfection, like someone had gone over it with sandpaper until every imperfection disappeared. And then she saw it. In the references section, one name jumped out, Brielle Moore, a colleague from her own department. The same Brielle who had nearly landed the project lead role before Jenna got it. Brielle, who had smirked during Jenna's presentation, who preferred shortcuts over hard work, who treated networking like a sport. And now she was listed as Lucas Bennett's reference. Jenna's stomach tightened. This wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. Late one night, Jenna pulled up the company's internal email archive. Nothing illegal, just a bit of quiet cross-checking. She searched for instances where Brielle and Lucas appeared in the same thread. And there it was, a copy of the gala invitation list. Lucas hadn't been on the original roster. But 3 days before the event, a request came in from Brielle's account, asking to add one extra guest. She had brought him there. The pieces began to align. Jenna started piecing together the whispers she'd ignored. The offhand comments in the hallway, the sideways glances during meetings, the subtle, calculated politeness that always meant something was brewing. And then came the final hit, an anonymous email sent to the management inbox, requesting review of a potential personal relationship between Jenna Caldwell and one of the company's investors, possible abuse of personal connections to influence strategic decisions. Jenna stared at the screen, her pulse sharp in her ears. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone was setting her up, and doing it with surgical precision. The email had no signature, no evidence, but it was just enough to plant suspicion. Jenna was summoned to a closed-door meeting. The HR director sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 members of the legal department. No accusations, just a clarification session, the kind designed to sound routine but feel like a cross-examination. Jenna sat there, composed, so calm it almost surprised her. She answered every question clearly, methodically. She denied any conflict of interest. She presented her records, project files, correspondence, progress notes, all documented, transparent, professional. Then came the question she knew was coming. "What about your relationship with Mr. Theo Whitman?" one of them asked. She didn't flinch. "I met him at the company's fundraising gala. I had no idea he was an investor until days later, and since finding out, I've never sought or accepted any professional favor from him." The answer was short, direct, clean enough to leave no room for spin, yet human enough to be believed. The meeting ended without an official conclusion, but Jenna knew the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, the glow of her laptop screen spilling across the half-finished campaign plan. She couldn't focus, not because she was afraid, but because she was disgusted. Lucas, the man who'd once made her shrink into herself, was back, this time wearing the mask of a promising candidate. And Brielle somehow was twisting reality into a weapon, angling to shove Jenna into a corner. Not because they were better, but because they couldn't stand the idea that someone like her could rise without clinging to someone else's hand. Her phone buzzed. Theo. His name lit up on the screen. She hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because she didn't want to need him to move forward. Not again. Monday morning. Jenna had barely stepped out of the elevator when the HR director's assistant was already waiting for her. "Miss Caldwell, the board wants to see you. Emergency meeting." No explanation. No calendar invite. Her pulse quickened as she walked into the conference room. Everyone was already there. The HR director, the head of legal, a representative from the board. No smiles, no greetings, just a heavy, deliberate silence. She sat in the chair they'd set aside for her, hands cold against the polished wood of the table. "We've received additional information regarding the conflict of interest concerns related to your campaign," the HR director began without preamble. Jenna tightened her grip on her hands. "I've already provided full documentation proving every proposal I made was based on data, market research, and internal feedback." "We're aware," the man said. "But there's another issue, one that's far more serious." The IT director stepped into the room, carrying a thick folder. He set it down on the table with a dull thud. Jenna's stomach dropped. Something told her, this wasn't just about rumors anymore. "There's evidence that your internal account was accessed externally," the IT director said, his tone clipped. "Sensitive project files were copied without authorization." Jenna went still. "I didn't do that." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes burned. "I know I'm the one under suspicion," she said evenly. "I know this all started because of my personal connection to one of the investors, but that doesn't mean I've done anything wrong." "Then who did?" No one answered. The room sank into heavy silence. She scanned the faces around the table, cold, unreadable. And one face not there. Theo. No message, no call, nothing. A familiar dread began to rise, that old, bitter knowledge. Men disappear when things get hard. She'd learned that lesson enough times to believe it. Drawing a slow breath, she steadied her voice. "If there's no concrete evidence of misconduct," she said, "then I'd like to continue my work as usual until the investigation reaches an official conclusion." No one nodded, but no one stopped her either, which, in Jenna's experience, was the corporate equivalent of "you're on your own." Jenna rose, holding her posture steady. Her hand was already on the door handle when, "Wait." The voice came from behind her. She turned. The door had just opened. It was Theo. No suit. No polished investor facade. Just Theo, sleeves rolled up, a small USB drive in his hand. "I have proof," he said, setting it on the table. The air in the room shifted instantly. Theo plugged in the drive, and the screen filled with data logs, timestamps, IP addresses, cold, precise evidence. Lucas Bennett and Brielle Moore used Brielle's admin credentials to access Jenna's account, Theo explained evenly. Twice, both on weekend nights when system monitoring was at its lowest. He clicked again. Security footage appeared, grainy but clear enough, Lucas and Brielle slipping out of the office long after hours. "And this," Theo continued, opening an audio file, "is a recorded call. Lucas contacted a former IT contractor asking for help recovering data Jenna accidentally deleted. Internal review confirms no data was ever lost." Silence fell, sharp and absolute. No one spoke. No one needed to. The truth was standing right there, wearing rolled sleeves and a calm expression that cut through every layer of doubt in the room. 3 days later, Jenna received the official notice. Both Lucas and Brielle had withdrawn their applications and terminated all ties with the company. No press release, no formal memo, just a quiet cleanup, the kind everyone in the building understood without a word being said. That evening, Jenna sat alone in a quiet cafe, trying to let her mind unclench. She'd made it through. Yet somehow her chest felt heavier than when the accusations had first begun. Theo walked in, right on time. He sat across from her, silent for a moment, before speaking. "You okay?" he asked. Jenna met his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing up." He nodded. "I couldn't not show up." A stillness hung between them, the kind that carries more than words could. Then she spoke, slow and deliberate. "But I need you to understand something." He waited. "I don't want to be saved," she said. Her voice didn't waver, but it cut through the small, quiet space between them. "I want to be trusted." Theo gave a small nod. And in that simple gesture, she knew. He understood. "I didn't come to save you," Theo said quietly. "I came because you deserve to see the truth brought into the light, and because I knew that if it were someone else, you'd have done the same." Jenna exhaled, the breath catching on its way out, like something heavy inside her had finally been set down. "I don't know what this is between us, Theo," she said softly, "but if it starts from imbalance, I'm not sure I want to keep walking down that road." "Then we start over," he said without hesitation. "From the beginning. No debts, no hierarchy, just two people, trying to understand each other." For the first time in weeks, Jenna smiled, not because she was defended, but because she was seen. Saturday. No rain, but the sky was gray. A gentle gray, as if the city itself had decided to take a breath. Jenna made herself a cup of coffee, opened her laptop, ready to sketch out the next quarter's plan. Then her eyes caught on a small envelope resting on the desk. No one sent handwritten letters anymore, but Theo did. Thick paper, fine ink, steady handwriting. On the front, one word, Jenna. She opened it. Inside there was nothing elaborate, no long letter, no flourish. "Jenna, if you choose what's real, I'm still here. But if you need space, I understand. T." That was all. But Jenna read those 3 lines over and over, as if each word were whispering directly into her chest. That afternoon, she got in her car and drove out of the city. No message, no warning. The destination came to her the moment she read, "I'm still here." A small cafe tucked away in the old warehouse district, the one Theo had once mentioned. He'd said it was where he went when he needed quiet to code. A place where no one looked twice at him, where he could be, in his own words, anonymously human. She'd never been there before. But today, she needed to know, was the real thing he spoke of still there? When she pushed the door open, a small wind chime rang softly, a sound that felt oddly familiar, like something that had been waiting. The space was small. Old wooden tables, a self-serve bookshelf, the counter tucked into the back, the scent of hand-brewed coffee mixed with a faint musk of aged varnish, the kind of smell that carried memory, even for someone who'd never lived it. And there he was. In the far corner, under the wide glass window, his laptop was open, headphones draped to the side, half a cup of coffee resting nearby. He was reading something, his gaze steady and focused, until she walked closer. He looked up, not startled, not surprised, as if he'd known she would come. No showy smile, no quick greeting, just that same calm look she remembered from the gala when she'd first said, "My ex is watching." Only this time, no one was watching. No one to prove anything to. Jenna pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "You're still here," she said. He nodded lightly. "Same table, same cold brew, no sugar." Are you always this quiet? Only when I'm waiting for something that doesn't need an explanation. She looked at him for a long moment. Then spoke. No hesitation, no detours. I'm not going to kiss you to make anyone jealous again. Theo's breath caught, just for a second, but he didn't speak. But I do want to kiss you, she went on, her voice softer now, trembling just slightly, because it was true. Because of you. Theo's eyes softened, as if in that moment he'd finally set down the last of an old wound he'd carried too long. He rose, stepped around the table. Jenna stood too, facing him. No shimmering lights, no wine glasses, gowns, or background music. Just two people. One heart that had once been left behind, and one that chose to stay. When their lips met, the world seemed to stop. No hesitation, no testing the water. It was a kiss that burned, fierce, alive, not because old pain needed filling, but because for the first time, they both knew they were chosen. Not for what they'd lost, not because they needed saving, but because they wanted to stay, with someone who saw them fully and didn't look away. At the far end of the cafe, the young barista smiled quietly as he glanced over. He'd seen hundreds of couples pass through this place, but rarely moments like this, when two people kissed, as though they'd finally found their way out of their own hearts. That night, Jenna went home, slipped off her shoes, and sat down on the floor beneath the soft glow of a single lamp. She reached for the letter Theo had left her, and opened it once more. And for the first time in years, she didn't need to analyze, to brace herself, or to prove anything to anyone. She just needed to live with what was real.